Good evening and welcome to our live coverage of the latest mission from NASA's Kennedy Space Center. I'm Stephen Young and I'll be providing our commentary for this broadcast. We're coming to you live from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at the Kennedy Space Center press site. Given the business of the week, we have some staff shuffling tonight. Will Robinson-Smith has the night off. But he will be back for our launch coverage of the third integrated launch of Starship, set for no earlier than Thursday morning. Adam Bernstein is already down at Starbase ahead of the planned launch of Starship. And Michael Caine will be getting some photographs of the Falcon 9 from vantage points near the spaceport tonight. If you'd like to follow them and keep up with their launch photography, here are their handles on X, formerly known as Twitter. Make sure you give them a follow, and don't forget to give the main Spaceflight Now account at Spaceflight Now a follow too, and you'll be kept up to date with all the latest information and see the fantastic photos from our team of photographers. In the center of your screen, you're looking at a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket, which is sitting at the heart of historic Launch Complex 39A. In less than an hour, SpaceX will attempt to launch the Starlink Group 6-44 mission. This is the 16th dedicated mission launching SpaceX's upgraded Starlink V2 mini satellites this year. Currently, SpaceX is targeting a liftoff at 7:51 p.m. Eastern Time. And for our viewers joining from around the world, that's 23:51 UTC. If you'd like to support our coverage of the space program, please hit the like button and click subscribe so you'll get notifications when new videos are posted. That way you won't miss any of our live streams. Also, please share this stream. It helps more people find this live coverage and everything else going on with our channel. We can't do these launch broadcasts without the support of our members and viewers. And we'd like to thank everyone who's made a contribution to help fund our coverage. We're now at the T-minus 55-minute, 13-second mark as SpaceX counts down towards the liftoff at 7:51 p.m. They did push back the launch about 20 minutes earlier tonight. They didn't provide any explanation for that delay. Like to give a big thank you to Artemis for a $100 super chat. That's a fantastic contribution towards our coverage, and we really appreciate that. We're doing our best to cover events both here at the Cape and in Texas this week at Starbase, and super chat contributions like the one we've just received from Artemis really help us out. We're less than 20 minutes away from the point in the countdown in which the launch director will give their go for the start of propellant load for tonight's launch. Those of us who haven't joined us on a recent launch, SpaceX is no longer providing mission audio ahead of the final minutes of the countdown. However, we do have extensive experience covering these launches, and we'll guide you through the count and talk about some of the visual cues to let us know that things are likely on track. SpaceX is running the countdown from its Hangar X facility nearby at Cape Kennedy Space Center. That's also the facility where they refurbish the Falcon 9 boosters and prepare them for flight. SpaceX also has support for this launch from control rooms at their headquarters in Hawthorne in California. Again, tonight's launch is targeting a liftoff at 7:51 p.m. Eastern Time. That's 23:51 UTC. They have multiple backup opportunities tonight until 11:29 p.m. Eastern Time. There are also additional backup opportunities tomorrow evening, starting at 7:04 p.m. Eastern. The weather is a little better than a coin toss tonight. According to the 45th Weather Squadron, the weather is 60% favorable for liftoff during the window. Meteorologists are tracking the thick cloud rule and the cumulus cloud rule. They've also been watching the upper level winds, which are cited as being between low and moderate levels of potential impact on tonight's launch. And if we take a look at a wide view of the press site area here at the Kennedy Space Center, you can see there is some cloud cover tonight, but still some patches of blue sky. The cloud cover is a little more dense as you go west and to the south and north of the Kennedy Space Center. So hopefully we'll get a decent view of the launch tonight, and the clouds won't interfere too much with our view here. The 24-hour backup window looks significantly better. The weather is 95% favorable, with only the cumulus cloud rule in play at launch. However, upper level winds might remain a concern tomorrow. Just checking in on the chat, I can see we've had some more super chats, and we really appreciate the support we're getting tonight. Thank you to John Dunn for a $5 super chat, Mitchell Wilbur for $20, and Emothic von Helsing, $100. Thank you so much. That's so appreciated. Really helps us bring you this coverage. Now at T-minus 48 minutes and 25 seconds and counting. And another thanks to Artemis for living up to his word and donating $250 in a super chat. Thank you so much, Artemis. We are really honored by your support of our coverage. And thanks to Josh King for a $19.99 super chat, who says, "Go Falcon 9 and go Starship." So let's take a look at the countdown timeline for today's Starlink mission. At the T-minus 38-minute mark, the launch director should have completed their poll and verified they are go for the start of the loading of propellants aboard the Falcon 9. If the go is given, propellant loading will start at the T-minus 35-minute mark. Kerosene will be loaded on the first and second stages. Also, liquid oxygen will be pumped aboard the first stage. At T-minus 16 minutes, the liquid oxygen loading on the second stage should get underway. Prior to this, we'll see the so-called big vent from the strong back at the launch pad as the feed lines are chilled. At T-minus 7 minutes, the chill down of the 9 Merlin engines will get underway. This involves flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps. This will protect those engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. About 6 minutes prior to launch, the first stage kerosene tank should be full. Then, at about T-minus 4.5 minutes, we'll see the strong back structure begin to retract from the Falcon 9 rocket. It'll recline to an angle of about 1.5 degrees. Leaning back ever so slightly from the Falcon 9, it will stay there until liftoff. Then, at the moment of ignition and liftoff, that strong back will pull back in a more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9 off the pad. At T-minus 2 minutes, the liquid oxygen loading should be complete. The Falcon 9 will be fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellants. Once we get into the final 60 seconds, the control of the countdown will be handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard computers. The propellant tanks will be brought up to flight pressure, and the SpaceX launch director will give their go for liftoff. The engine ignition command comes at the T-minus 3-second point. If all 9 engines ignite and are deemed to be healthy, the flight computer will give the command to release the hold down clamps, and the Falcon 9 will lift off at T0. We should be less than 10 minutes away from the start of propellant load for this evening's launch. We have not received any updates from SpaceX on the status of the countdown, but it's around this time that if the launch was proceeding at 7:51, that the launch director would be starting to poll the teams The SpaceX engineering director would have already given a go for launch by this point if the countdown was indeed proceeding. SpaceX often doesn't confirm the point in the countdown that we have reached until we get to the moment of fueling. So that should hopefully be coming in the next 7 minutes or so. Just returning to the chat briefly, big thanks to Helena for a 10 Canadian dollar super chat. Thank you very much for your support tonight as we count down towards the launch of the Falcon 9 here at the Kennedy Space Center. Here's a live look at the Starship vehicle on the launch pad at Starbase in Texas. Just a reminder that we'll be joining forces with our friends at Lab Padre to bring you live coverage of the Starship launch tomorrow morning. We should be on the air about 90 minutes ahead of the planned liftoff, which at the moment is targeted for 7 a.m. Central Time. That's the opening of a 110-minute launch window tomorrow. And we'll have coverage hosted by Will Robinson-Smith, and we'll have a number of special guests joining us to provide expert commentary on that mission. Returning to the Falcon 9 launch at the Kennedy Space Center, we're now under 39 minutes from the targeted liftoff time of 7:51 p.m. coming up on the point where the loading of propellants will begin on the Falcon 9 if everything is on track for the liftoff this evening at 7:51 p.m. We're still awaiting any word from SpaceX, but if we don't get that, we might still see some signs of the fueling process. The Falcon 9 booster that is flying tonight is making its 19th flight, and as you can see, it's quite sooty, and we should hopefully see the buildup of frost and the formation of some vapor as the Falcon 9 is loaded with those cryogenic propellants. Can be quite visible, and the frost ring as it moves up the side of the rocket is a very good fuel gauge to indicate exactly how much propellant is already in the tanks. So we have reached the point where we should be seeing the start of fueling. However, we have not received any update, and it looks like we might be seeing another slip in the launch of tonight's Falcon 9. Not seeing any evidence that fueling has begun, and SpaceX has not provided any updates. I'm going to bring down the countdown clock at this point, as it does appear that there may be a delay in tonight's launch, so we'll stand by and await for further information. So SpaceX is now confirming a delay. The liftoff is now targeted for 9:25 p.m. Eastern Time. So that's a little over 2 hours from now. We'll adjust our countdown clock and get that up on the screen so you can keep track of the remaining time in the countdown. SpaceX doesn't give us any updates as to the reason why the launch has slipped. We do know that upper level winds were a problem, and there was some concern about the thick cloud roll and the cumulus cloud roll. We don't know if those are factors in the delay this evening. So with that news that the launch has slipped, we're now at T-minus 2 hours, 5 minutes, and 24 seconds and counting. We'll continue to bring you live views of the launch pad as the countdown proceeds a little later than we'd hoped tonight. Here's a wide view of the skies over the launch site here. As you can see, the cloud is filling in the blue sky that we did see earlier. Now this launch, which originally would have been right around sunset, is now going to be in the dark, unfortunately. But we'll bring you live coverage of that launch whenever it happens. Want to welcome Steve Crossland, who's become a member at the pad leader level. That's another good way you can support our coverage by becoming a member of the channel. When you become a member of our YouTube channel, you get access to member-only videos, including a 4K stream of Pad 39A that is available right now. You can also get discounts in our online shop, shop.spaceflightnow.com. So if you were tuning in just now expecting to see a liftoff this evening, the original launch time of 7:29 p.m. slipped to 7:51, and we've now received word from SpaceX that they are pushing back the launch further, and liftoff is now scheduled for 9:25 p.m. Eastern Time. So that's coming up in a little over 2 hours from now. Darkness is falling here at the Kennedy Space Center. We'll pause our commentary for a while, but I'll drop back in occasionally, bring you up to date on any developments that we hear. But just to repeat the news that SpaceX has pushed back the launch to 9:25 p.m. Eastern Time. Big thanks to Greg Warrener, who's gifted 5 Spaceflight Now memberships. If you're one of the lucky people to receive the generosity from Greg, please be sure to give him a thanks in the chat. T-minus 2 hours and counting. Once again, if you're just tuning in, expecting to see the launch of the Falcon 9 from the Kennedy Space Center, the liftoff has been pushed back to 9:25 p.m. SpaceX has not provided any reason. There were some weather concerns going into this countdown. There was a 60% chance of acceptable weather, but there was some concern that there could be a violation of the thick cloud rule. There's also a chance of cumulus clouds, which all of those rules are associated with the possibility of a lightning strike. In addition to that, there were some low to moderate concerns about the upper level winds that the Falcon 9 would fly through as it ascends from the Kennedy Space Center. And obviously there could be some technical issue that is holding up the launch. But once again, SpaceX doesn't provide any updates on the progress of the countdown. So we may never know why this launch has been delayed. The Falcon 9 rocket rolled out of the hangar that you can see on the right-hand side of the screen here with the US flag and the SpaceX logo. It rolled out of there this morning before sunrise and was lifted upright on the launch pad for today's launch. Seemed like that process was all accomplished in plenty of time. Well, we're now at the original launch time for the Falcon 9, but if you're just joining us, as you can see, it's still firmly bolted down on the launch pad. SpaceX has pushed back the launch time twice this evening and is now targeting a liftoff at 9:25 p.m. So stay with us. We'll bring you coverage of the countdown and launch whenever it happens. Fairly cloudy skies here now at Kennedy Space Center. We're not sure, once again, if that's the reason for the delay this evening. A big thank you to Mr. Mining Plays, who has gifted 10 Spaceflight Now memberships. If you have received a membership for their generosity, please be sure to thank them. Just a reminder that this is not the only launch that SpaceX is preparing for. The Starship and Super Heavy vehicle is standing on the orbital launch mount at Starbase, as you can see here in this live view from our friends at Lab Padre. Liftoff is scheduled for 7 a.m. Central Time. And we'll have live coverage. That coverage should start around 90 minutes before the planned liftoff at 7 a.m. Central Time. This will be the third flight test of the Starship vehicle. Going to be flying a slightly different profile. The plan for the original flights, the first two test flights, were for the Super Heavy booster to splash down in the Gulf of Mexico. That's still the plan for this third test. But the Starship vehicle will this time target the Indian Ocean. Previously, on the earlier test flights, it would have traveled almost all the way around the world and splashed down in the Pacific Ocean near Hawaii. But change has been made to this particular test flight. They will attempt an in-flight refueling demonstration, moving propellants from the header tanks on the Starship to the main propellant tanks. And also there will be an in-orbit or in-space test firing of the Raptor engines on the Starship. That will help bring the Starship down in the Indian Ocean. This launch will be shy of orbital velocity, so if anything goes wrong and they don't perform that burn, the Starship will still splash down in the Indian Ocean. There's also been some extensive work to modify the tank farm that is used to load propellants aboard the Starship vehicle. You can see some of those tanks poking up over the black wall that runs along the highway there. And that will mean the loading of propellants on the Starship vehicle will take a lot less time. So tomorrow that process will begin and be completed within an hour of in the final hour of the countdown. So that process starts within an hour and is in many ways very similar to the Falcon Heavy fuel loading process in terms of the amount of time it takes. Once again, if you're just joining us, the launch of the Falcon 9 is now targeted for 9:25 p.m. Eastern Time. If you're just joining us, the countdown clock is at T-minus 1 hour, 38 minutes, and 19 seconds. SpaceX has pushed back the launch to 9:25 p.m. Eastern Time. We're going to stay on the air and bring you coverage of the launch whenever it happens tonight. So stay tuned. This is the launch of 23 Starlink satellites on a Falcon 9. It's the Starlink 6-44 mission. And is happening on the eve of the third test flight of SpaceX's Starship rocket, which you can see here in this live view from Starbase in Texas. And just a reminder that we'll be bringing you live coverage of that in the morning. You can probably hear the wind picking up a little bit here at the Kennedy Space Center press site. The flag is fluttering in the breeze out there. This is the first launch from Pad 39A since the Crew 8 mission took off a week and a half ago on its way to the International Space Station. SpaceX modified the launch pad, converted it from the Crew Dragon configuration for a fairing-based Falcon 9 launch. We're now 1 hour, 30 minutes away from the launch of the Falcon 9 on the Starlink 6-44 mission from Pad 39A at the Kennedy Space Center. We've already had 3 launch times so far this evening. SpaceX originally targeted 7:29, then 7:51, and then pushed the launch back further to 9:25. Currently, that's where it's standing at the moment. Want to give a big thank you to Roseanne DeVasto for a $20 super chat. Thank you very much. And also to Kubansky for your super chat contribution. We do appear to be seeing a little bit of venting or fog out of the launch pad, so hopefully that's a good sign that there might be some progress here. Not sure if that's the weather or some venting from the ground equipment as they get ready for today's launch. But we do see something out there, so we'll pin our hopes on the fact that that's launch preparations underway and that things are on track for a 9:25 p.m. liftoff. We're now back to an hour and 15 minutes to the launch of the Falcon 9 from Pad 39A at the Kennedy Space Center. Liftoff currently is targeted for 9:25 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. This is the launch of 23 Starlink satellites on the Starlink Group 6-44 mission. Liftoff has been pushed back twice this evening. We don't know the reason for those delays. There were some weather concerns. The 45th Weather Squadron, in a forecast they issued yesterday, predicted a 60% chance of acceptable conditions for launch this evening. One of the concerns was thick clouds, and there are certainly some clouds in the Kennedy Space Center area tonight. But once again, we don't know the exact reason for the delay. But for now, we're assuming that the countdown is on track for the 9:25 p.m. liftoff, but we will bring you any updates as soon as we get them. We're seeing some venting from the strongback structure, which is a good sign that launch preparations are continuing this evening. You can see those puffs of vapor from the white strongback structure, which runs up alongside the vehicle. Believe where we're seeing that venting is where we will hopefully be seeing the so-called big vent at the T-minus 20-minute mark during the countdown. That is the vent port for the liquid oxygen line that runs up to the second stage of the Falcon 9. And the big vent is part of the process to chill those lines down prior to the start of propellant load. And what we could be seeing is some early purges of that line that occur during the countdown. We do usually see some venting at this point about between an hour and 2 hours prior to liftoff. So hopefully what we're seeing here is a good sign that the countdown is back on track, and we'll be seeing a liftoff of this Starlink mission in a little over an hour's time. We're now at T-minus 1 hour and 5 minutes to the launch of the Falcon 9. Want to thank the 8,000 of you who have stuck with us while we've been waiting for SpaceX to get the Falcon 9 into the terminal count configuration. We did see some venting earlier that indicates that things might be back on track. Liftoff is targeted for 9:25 p.m. tonight. If you haven't done so already, please hit the like button on the stream. That really helps us out. Brings in a bigger audience, and hopefully everyone will get to see a spectacular liftoff coming up in just over an hour's time. It's also a good idea to hit the subscribe button. That will mean you'll get notifications. If you also hit the bell when you do that, the notification icon will ensure that you'll get an alert when we go live for future launches. And just a reminder that we will be bringing you live coverage of the Starship launch in the morning. Getting this view in from our friends at Lab Padre of the Starship vehicle standing on the pad as SpaceX gets ready for the third test flight of its fully reusable launch vehicle, made up of the Starship vehicle at the top and the Super Heavy booster at the base. We'll be covering that launch, which is at currently is targeted for 7 a.m. Central Time, and we'll be bringing you live coverage in partnership with Lab Padre. And that coverage should get underway about 90 minutes before the planned launch. We're now less than 1 hour to the planned launch time for the Falcon 9 at Launch Complex 39A at the Kennedy Space Center. As far as we know, liftoff remains targeted for 9:25 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. That's 0125 UTC for our viewers around the world. I'm Stephen Young, and I'll be providing the commentary for tonight's launch. Will Robinson-Smith has the night off as we get ready for the launch of the third Starship test flight, which is scheduled for tomorrow morning. Adam Bernstein, who is usually here manning our cameras, is at Starbase and has set up remote cameras at the launch site, and will be providing some of the views we'll have tomorrow for our live coverage. So I'm performing triple duty tonight, doing commentary and handling the switching of the video, and hopefully tracking the rocket once it lifts off in just under an hour's time. We should be less than 20 minutes away from the point in the countdown when the launch director will give their go for the start of propellant load. The countdown is being controlled from SpaceX's Hangar X facility, which is located here at the Kennedy Space Center and is also the location where the boosters are refurbished. SpaceX has pushed back the launch a few times this evening. It is now targeting 9:25 p.m. We haven't had any explanation as to the reason for the delays. We're hoping we will hear something from SpaceX soon to confirm that all is on track for a 9:25 p.m. launch. As soon as we hear anything, we'll bring that to you here. Want to thank Calistia Lee for her very generous $20 super chat. Certainly is a busy night. It's going to be a busy 24 hours as we have been preparing all day for the Starship launch in Starbase, Texas. And we'll be covering that in the morning. And hopefully this Falcon 9 rocket will lift off in less than, in about 50 minutes from now. And we're getting word that once again SpaceX is pushing back tonight's launch, just a short delay. So they are now targeting 9:39 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. So our clock has jumped back. This is the third time tonight that SpaceX has adjusted the T0 time for this launch. Once again, we've had no explanation as to the reason for the delays, but we are seeing some venting from the strung back out at Launchpad 39A. Does indicate that they are trying to get into the correct configuration for launch. You can see some of that vapor wisping away from the strung back. Something that we do see, but we usually see it between an hour and 2 hours from the planned launch time. We don't know the reason for the delay, but there was a couple of concerns listed in the weather forecast for thick clouds and cumulus clouds, and also upper level winds were noted as a possible concern. But once again, SpaceX doesn't explain the reasons for these delays any longer. But conditions here at the Space Center have been quite cloudy. If you're just joining us, you're looking live at Launch Pad 39A at the Kennedy Space Center, where SpaceX is getting ready for the launch of 23 Starlink satellites. That liftoff has been pushed back several times this evening and is now scheduled for 9:39 p.m. This is the Starlink 6-44 mission. It will be the 25th Falcon 9 rocket to fly this year. Well, we're back again at that point where the launch director would be polling their teams over the next 10 minutes or so. The weather may be a factor in tonight's launch delays, and they'll be getting weather briefings from the 45th Weather Squadron based at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Yesterday, they issued a forecast that indicated there was a 60% chance of acceptable weather for launch tonight. Some clouds have rolled in across the central Florida area and might be moving through, and that might open up the opportunity for a launch if the weather is the problem tonight. Just stepped outside our news bureau at the Kennedy Space Center press site, took a look at the sky conditions, and the cloud is indeed thinning. Can see a few breaks and some stars, and the crescent moon is visible through a thin layer of cloud. So those are all good signs, if the weather is holding up this launch, that those conditions may be clearing the area, and SpaceX will be able to hopefully start fueling the Falcon 9 based on the current launch time of 9:39 p.m. That fueling operation will get underway in about 10 minutes if the go is given to begin that process. So as we get closer to the targeted liftoff time, let's take a look at the countdown timeline for tonight's mission. So we're hoping that weather conditions and any technical issues are resolved, and the launch director will give a go for the start of propellant load in the next 5 minutes or so. That loading of propellants begins with the rocket grade kerosene RP1, which is loaded aboard the first and second stages, and also the loading of liquid oxygen on the second stage. And although SpaceX doesn't provide us with mission audio, we should see the buildup of vapor and frost on the first stage of the vehicle. That will be a clear indication that that fueling process has got underway. At T-minus 16 minutes, it's the turn of the second stage to start receiving its load of liquid oxygen. The kerosene load should be completed prior to that on the second stage. And we'll also see the big vent from the strongback at about the T-minus 20-minute mark. That vent is part of the chill down of the feed lines that go up to the second stage of the rocket. With 7 minutes left on the clock, the chill down of the 9 Merlin engines will get underway. This process involves opening the pre-valves and allowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps of the engines. This will protect them from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence later in the countdown. About 6 minutes prior to launch, the first stage kerosene tank should be full. At T-minus 4.5 minutes, we'll see the strongback start to retract from the Falcon 9 vehicle. It will recline to an angle of about 1.5 degrees. It'll stay in that position until liftoff. As the Falcon 9 pulls away from the pad, the strongback will fall away in a more rapid fashion, so it clears the way for the Falcon 9 as it rises on its ascent. At about 2 minutes into the count, or 2 minutes left in the count, the liquid oxygen loading will be complete. And at this point, the Falcon 9 will be fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. Then in the final 60 seconds of the countdown, the control of the vehicle will be handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard computers. The propellant tanks will be brought up to flight pressure, and during the next 15 seconds or so, we should get the go from the SpaceX launch director, the final go for launch. The engine ignition sequence is commanded at the T-minus 3 second point. If all 9 Merlin 1D engines ignite and are determined to be healthy, the flight computer will give the command to release the hold-down clamps, and the Falcon 9 will lift off at T0. We're less than 2 minutes from the point at which the start of propellant load should begin. We've not had any updates from SpaceX, but we also have not heard that there's been another delay. So we'll continue to stand by, and hopefully the propellant load will get underway and we'll get a visual indication that that's happening. And if not, we'll stand by for a new launch time. But for now, the Falcon 9 is scheduled for liftoff at 9:39 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. T-minus 35 minutes and counting. If all is going according to plan at this point, the loading of propellants aboard the Falcon 9 should be getting underway. We have not had confirmation of that from SpaceX, but we'll keep a close eye on the vehicle, and hopefully we will get some indication that that process has begun. Taking a close-up look at the first stage of the vehicle, and if the propellant load process is underway, we should start to see some vapors and frost forming around the whitish band that you see. And SpaceX has confirmed that propellant load is underway. So good news that that process has begun. So with that confirmation from SpaceX, the loading of liquid oxygen aboard the first stage has begun, and kerosene will also be loaded aboard the vehicle. The kerosene will be going into the tanks on both the first and second stage of the vehicle. So after several delays this evening, SpaceX is now committed to the launch time of 9:39 p.m. And if you look closely now at the vehicle, you can see the first wisps of vapor forming on the outside of the vehicle. This is as the super cold propellants loaded aboard the Falcon 9, the tanks cool down, and this is actually the water vapor in the air forming condensation and this misty collar of vapor around the vehicle as that warm, moist Florida air comes into contact with the cold fuselage of the Falcon 9. Want to give a special thank you to Callistia Lee, one of our members, who has gifted 10 Spaceflight Now memberships. Very generous of you, Callistia, and we really appreciate your support for all our coverage. We can't bring you these broadcasts without the support of our members and viewers, and you can show your support through the Super Chat feature or becoming a member, or you can simply just hit the like button and subscribe. We can clearly see the vapors now building up around the first stage of the Falcon 9 as liquid oxygen and liquid kerosene is loaded aboard the first stage. Kerosene is also being pumped into the second stage tank. These propellants are super chilled to pack in more punch than other rockets which use liquid oxygen at a higher temperature. This so-called densified propellants is only used by the Falcon 9 vehicle. Want to thank Josh King for a very generous $10 super chat. We're now less than 30 minutes to the launch of the Falcon 9 with 23 Starlink satellites. Also, over the next few minutes or so, the loading of cryogenic helium will get underway on the vehicle. That cryogenic helium is used to pressurize the propellant tanks. Want to thank Chris Stallings for a $10 super chat. Really appreciate all the support that's allowing us to bring you this coverage. We're now at T minus 25 minutes and counting. At this point, the cryogenic helium will be loaded aboard both stages of the vehicle. That process once again got underway within the last 5 minutes to provide pressurization for the propellants inside the first and second stage tanks. The loading of helium began with the first stage and is now continuing with the loading of the storage tanks on the second stage. The spheres containing the helium are within the actual propellant tanks themselves. The countdown clock is now approaching the T-minus 22-minute mark. Coming up soon will be the so-called big vent from the strongback. That's the start of the chill down process before the loading of liquid oxygen begins into that stage. And there we see the start of the so-called big vent, that chill down of the propellant lines that run up the strongback to feed the second stage liquid oxygen tank. This process is now underway, clearly visible. One of the most dramatic portions of the countdown prior to liftoff. This venting process will continue for the next couple of minutes before the start of loading of propellants onto the second stage. By now, the second stage should be fully loaded with kerosene, and the first stage will be filling with its load of liquid oxygen and kerosene. The kerosene tank on the first stage will be fully loaded by about the T-minus 6 minute mark, and it will be in the final couple of minutes of the countdown that the two liquid oxygen tanks reach their capacity. I've stepped back outside and am now set up at a desk outside our News Bureau here at the Kennedy Space Center press site, and the skies are definitely clearing. There are many stars visible and the crescent moon, so conditions are looking much better for today's launch of the Falcon 9. It was originally scheduled for 7:29, and we don't know the precise reason for the delay, but the weather was definitely less acceptable earlier in the evening, thicker cloud in the area, and a lot of that cloud appears to be clearing out. And as you can see, the big vent has now concluded, and the start of liquid oxygen load on the second stage will be getting underway in the next few seconds. Tonight's launch will be the 19th flight of this particular booster, which has the tail number B1062. Let's take a look at the flight history of this particular rocket. The booster debuted on November 5th, 2020. It was the launch of a GPS-3 space vehicle, or SV-4. It was built by Lockheed Martin and was the fourth of the newer version of these satellites for the U.S. Space Force's GPS constellation. Next came the June 17th launch in 2021 of the GPS-3 Space Vehicle 5 satellite. The third flight of this booster was on September 15th. It would be the first time this booster launched humans into orbit. It carried the four-member crew of the Inspiration 4 mission aboard the Crew Dragon Resilience. The fourth launch was on January 6, 2022. It was the Starlink 4-5 mission with 49 version 1.5 satellites on board. The fifth launch followed on April 8th and was the second crewed mission for this particular booster. It launched the Crew Dragon Endeavour and the Axiom 1 private astronauts to the International Space Station. Its sixth flight came 21 days, 6 hours, and 10 minutes later on April 29th, 2022. That was one of the shortest, if not the shortest, turnaround for a booster. The seventh flight was on June 8th, 2022 with the Nilesat 301 mission. Flights 8 through 12 were a series of Starlink missions. Its 13th flight was on March 9th, 2023, and it was the OneWeb 17 mission, which launched 40 of that company's broadband internet satellites. It was the third and final dedicated launch of OneWeb satellites by SpaceX. OneWeb completed its Generation 1 constellation launch with a launch provided by the Indian Space Research Organization. The 14th flight of this booster was the Arabsat 7B satellite, also known as Badr 8, which launched on May 27th, 2023. Flights 15 through 18 were also Starlink missions, the most recent of which was on the 29th of January this year. So this flight, the 19th flight, ties the record held by two other boosters, Booster 1058 and 1061. Unfortunately, Booster 1058 was destroyed when it toppled over in high seas on its way back to Port Canaveral after a successful launch and landing in December last year. So this booster about to become the joint fleet leader with 19 flights to its name. SpaceX had previously certified the Falcon 9 for 10 and 15 flights and is now just pushing forward, and we're not entirely clear if there is any limit now set on the Falcon 9 boosters. Now less than 10 minutes to the launch of the Falcon 9 with 23 Starlink satellites. When we get to the T-minus 5-minute mark, we should have live video and audio from SpaceX, and we'll bring that to you as soon as we have it. We'll also have tracking footage from our friend Pete Carson's Max Q Productions, and he's reporting that the skies have cleared near him. There are still some clouds, but hopefully we'll have a good view both here at the Kennedy Space Center and from Pete's tracking camera, which is located to the south and should get a good shot of the SpaceX booster. And speaking of the southern trajectory of this mission, let's take a look at that path the rocket is going to take once it lifts off from Pad 39A here at the Kennedy Space Center. So you're looking at a satellite view of Pad 39A, historic Pad 39A, the site of many Apollo and Space Shuttle missions, which was taken over by SpaceX and has been used so far for all the Crew Dragon missions and all the Falcon Heavy flights. So once the Falcon 9 lifts off from Pad 39A, it will fly in a southeast trajectory towards the Caribbean. Following stage separation, the Falcon 9 first stage, making its 19th flight tonight, will land on one of SpaceX's 3 drone ships east of the Bahamas. The one on deck tonight is a shortfall of Gravitas. The second stage of the booster will continue to place the Starlink satellites into orbit a little over an hour into the mission. Now less than 5 minutes to the launch of the Falcon 9. We're now getting audio from SpaceX, and we'll bring that in to the broadcast now. You should be hearing some of the sounds of the venting at the launch pad.
Strong back retract has started.
And we just heard there that the retraction of the strongback is getting underway. You'll notice there's a slight discrepancy between our clock and the SpaceX clock. That's because their broadcast comes with a little bit of a delay. That strongback structure is retracting to an angle of 1.5 degrees, and at liftoff will fall back further. The propellants are almost completely loaded aboard the first and second stages, and we should be hearing call-outs for that shortly. And I want to give a big thanks to Don Pierce and Trinity, aka Mama T, and Nelson Reyes for their super chat donations. If you haven't done so already, please hit the like button on our stream. That really helps us out.
Is complete.
And there we have confirmation that the loading of liquid oxygen aboard the first stage is complete.
Launch board is running.
And the countdown is holding. This means we'll not be seeing a launch of the Falcon 9 tonight. SpaceX has already ended its webcast. So a disappointing end to tonight's countdown. Not sure. Unfortunately, pulling triple duty here. I was setting up the cameras at the moment of the scrub, and not totally clear if the reason was given. Tonight's launch had been pushed back several times. The weather appeared to be a problem earlier in the night, but currently there are clear skies overhead at the Kennedy Space Center. No word from SpaceX as to the reason for the scrub this evening. We'll stay live for a bit longer, but because the Falcon 9 was fueled and the scrub occurred after the start of that process, there won't be any opportunity to recycle and make another launch attempt. SpaceX did have backup opportunities starting at 7:04 p.m. tomorrow night. That's Eastern Time. That's 23:04 UTC. So the countdown was halted, it appears, at around the 2-minute, 3-second mark. By this time, the loading of liquid oxygen on the first stage would have been completed, but the full propellant load might not have been on board at that time, and the final countdown sequence was over a minute away. There was still ground gas closeouts to be done, but the launch was scrubbed with just over 2 minutes left on the clock. Once again, no reason from SpaceX for tonight's scrub. The delays earlier might have been caused by the weather, which earlier in the night there was some cloud cover in the area, but that cleared up and allowed SpaceX to target 9:39 for tonight's launch, but unfortunately it was not to be, and a scrub was called with just 2 minutes left on the clock. So before we wrap up our coverage of this launch scrub this evening, just a reminder that at Starbase, SpaceX has a Starship vehicle on the launch pad ready for a test flight tomorrow morning. That test flight scheduled to get underway at 7 a.m. Central Time. And we'll be bringing you live coverage of that launch in partnership with friends at Lab Padre. And that coverage should begin about 90 minutes prior to liftoff. So please join us again. Coverage will be hosted by Will Robinson-Smith. We'll have some special guests to provide expert commentary on the progress of the countdown and the flight. And we'll also bring you all the footage that we can get. The weather conditions at Starbase are also presenting some potential problems. There's been some hazy conditions, some cloud cover, high winds, upper level winds have also raised some concerns. So stay tuned. We'll keep you informed on all the latest developments as SpaceX gets ready for that third test flight of the Starship vehicle. So with that, we'll sign off from our coverage here at the Kennedy Space Center. We'll hope to see you back in the morning for the Starship launch and perhaps for the second try for this Falcon 9 vehicle, which is carrying 23 Starlink satellites. And the launch was scrubbed with 2 minutes to go this evening. We'll see if SpaceX reschedules. So far, no updates on social media from SpaceX. The launch opportunities on Thursday start at 7:04. There will be probably a 4-hour window for the Starlink tomorrow if they decide to target a 24-hour turnaround following the scrub tonight. So with that, I'll wish you all a good evening, good night, good morning, wherever you are around the world. And we'll see you tomorrow for what promises to be a very interesting and exciting day in space launch coverage. So from the Kennedy Space Center, I'm Stephen Young, reporting for Spaceflight Now.